Okay, so we work at Mike's Pizza Shop. You have the following info about the 7 pizzas in the oven. It says 3 of the 7 have thick crust and 2 of the 3 thick crust pizzas have mushrooms. Of the remaining 4 pizzas, 2 of them have mushrooms. So we're going to choose a pizza at random from the oven. All right, so in part A, we're going to make a 2-way table to model this chance process. In part B, we're going to figure out if the events of getting a thick crust pizza and getting a pizza with mushrooms are independent. And in part C, we're going to add an 8th pizza to the oven. And this pizza is only going to have cheese with, the thick crust. And we're going to see if the events getting a thick crust pizza and getting a pizza with mushrooms are independent in this case. So let's start with part A. So 2-way table, table of rows and columns. So we're gonna have make basically 4 columns, 4 by 4, in that sense. And then across the columns, we're gonna have one event, and the other across the rows, we're gonna have the other event. Now let's see what our events are. So the events we're dealing with are getting a thick crust pizza, and the other event is getting a pizza with mushrooms. Okay, so let's break down the thick crust event on the top. Now, when you're doing problems like this, my advice is, to think of just the event and like the event not happening. So to explain what I mean, it's like in all the possibilities of getting pizza, you're either going to get a pizza with a thick crust or you're going to get pizza without a thick crust. You don't even have to go into detail about what type of crust it is. I don't know if it's going to be like a thin crust or, a cheesy crust. It just has to be not thick. So not thick crust and a thick crust. So let's put thick crust. This is like a tongue twister. I'm having trouble pronouncing it. Thick crust. And we'll say non-thick crust. So either you can get a thick crust or you can get a non-thick crust. Or, so either you get it or you don't. And the last column, always save it for your totals. Now across the rows, we have the other event. We have them, dealing with the mushrooms. So either you get a pizza with mushrooms, or you basically get no mushrooms, Don't care if it's like comes with, pepperoni or anchovies, hopefully not anchovies, but it's just mushrooms or no mushrooms. That's it. And then you got the total again. Then from there, we fill in the center. So I like to always advise work from the totals inward because totals are usually going to be the easiest. So let's look at what we got. It says we got 7 pizzas, in total in the oven. So the total, so down here will be 7. We took care of that 7. Actually, let me use a pencil. Actually, took care of that 7. Now it says 3 of the 7 pizzas have thick crust. So the total thick crust pizzas that you have are 3. So if we look at thick crust, the total of thick crust is 3. So you put that 3 there. And it says, and 2 of the 3 thick crust pizzas have mushrooms. So of 2 of the 3. So 2 out of the 3. So only thinking about thick crusts, we look at where it also has mushrooms, and that would be this box, thick crust with mushrooms, and this is 2 of them. So 2 there. And of the remaining 4, 2 of them have mushrooms. So from here you can kind of already figure out, but let me just kind of break it down in a little more detail. Let's say you can figure out anything else. Let's say the remaining 4, what would be the remaining 4? You have 3, and then that means you got 4 here. And now, so out of these 4s, 2 of them have mushrooms. There's different ways to interpret it. You could think, oh, just 2 have mushrooms, or 2 more mushrooms. In either case, you just do simple addition, fill in the blanks. You get 2 plus 1 is 3, so you put a 1 there. 2 plus 1 is 3. 2 plus 2 is 4. Here you got 1 plus 2 is 3. 2 plus 2 is 4. And again, just verify that it works both ways. And that's it. There's your 2-way table. Now let's answer some of these questions. Okay, are the events getting a thick crust pizza and getting a pizza with mushrooms independent? Okay, so let's represent each of these events with a symbol. So let's put capital T for thick crust. And let's put N, not a thick crust. Mushrooms M. And no mushrooms, we'll just put O. So if we're trying to figure out if the events getting a thick crust pizza and getting a pizza with mushrooms are independent, essentially you bit your so the basic idea is to figure out if the probability is going to change given one of the events occurring. So in this case, okay, that's you're like, what's the probability of getting thick crust pizza? So it's like probability of getting thick crust pizza, probability of T. Let's look at it that way. What's the probability of getting thick crust pizza just in general? That would just be simply 3 out of 7, because 3 thick crust out of the 7, so that's 3 out of 7. Now, if we're trying to figure out if 2 events are independent, you're basically trying to figure out if there's a relationship or an association between the 2 events. So another way to ask yourself is will this probability be affected, or will it change if we know the pizza has mushrooms? Will a pizza with mushrooms have a different probability of having a thick crust? Is the probability of a thick crust pizza change given that you have mushrooms? So again, one way to figure out now the probability of T given the other event occurring. What's the probability of T given mushrooms? Now, if you calculate this and this ends up being the same as this, then that means the events are independent, because the probability of this isn't affected by the fact that you have mushrooms occurring. But if this probability is different from this, then you can see that these 2 events are, not independent. They're dependent. There's a relationship. So let's figure out the probability of T given N. The probability of getting a thick crust given that you have mushrooms. So if you're told you got mushrooms, you only care about these guys. You only care about this row. You forget about the rest. Because you're told you got mushrooms on your pizza. What's the probability of it being a thick crust? So then here you got the probability of getting a thick crust. The probability of T is just 2 out of that 4. And obviously 3/7 is not the same as 2/4. So then you can say that the events are not independent because these probabilities are different. Not independent. Okay, now let's look at part C. Now we're going to add something to it. It says we're going to add another pizza to the oven. We're going to add an 8th pizza to the oven. And this pizza has thick crust with only cheese. Now we're going to say, now are the events getting a thick crust pizza and getting a pizza with mushrooms independent? So, to save some time, I'm going to erase these values. Says we got 8 total now. So yeah, we're adding pizza. So we have 8 total. And we're adding an 8th pizza that's thick crust with only cheese. So it's basically a thick crust pizza. We have another thick crust, so we have 4 now. And it doesn't got mushrooms, it only has cheese. So this 2, I actually didn't need to erase all of them. So this 2 doesn't change. This 1 here is going to change. We're going to have 2 there because that's the one with only cheese and no mushrooms. And the rest, again, this 4 is going to be here. The rest won't change because that's the only additional pizza you're given. So 4 and 4. So our new probability table is going to be this. Now what we're asking, are the events, independent in this case? So now let's look at in this case. So let's make it clearer than part C. Part C, let's look at what the probability of T is, and let's compare it to the probability of T given M. So the probability of T given M, the probability of getting a thick crust pizza given that it has mushrooms. Okay, so in this case, the probability of getting a thick crust pizza is 4 out of 8. There's 4 total out of the 8. So just in general, that's 4 out of 8. Now the probability of getting a thick crust pizza given that you got mushrooms. So now again, we're only dealing with this row because these are the mushroom pizzas. And the ones that have thick crust are going to be these two. So this is going to be 2 out of the 4. Now, hopefully you don't have a brain fart, but 4 out of 8 is just 1/2, which is the same as 2 out of 4. 1/2 or 50%. So these events are, the same, or the probability of these events are both 1/2. They're both 50%. So in this case, they are independent. They're independent because the chance of you getting a thick crust pizza, given that the pizza has mushrooms, doesn't change. It's not different from the probability of seeing a thick crust pizza in general. So there you go.